Welcome back to Mystara as the 1030 timeline continues, this time focusing on the Atruaghin clans. That would be the revised Atruaghin clans found in the Vaults of Pandius, as the original book famously had almost no detail on the subject it was written about. I had to push the Shadow Elves back to the next video because this one book took up the entirety of the video, because the clans were treated as individual nations rather than a single one. In fact, the fracturing of Atruaghin has been a long time coming. I'm Mr. Welch, it's time to go on the warpath. The 5 clans of Atruaghin have been going their own ways for a while. The differences between the cultures of its people have already divided them internally. The Tiger clan turned to the worship of entropic immortals and split from their kin centuries ago. The Turtle clan was isolated from the 3 remaining by the Great Plateau and had more contact with foreign nations than their own people. The Horse clan never wanted to be on the plateau and searched for a way to return to the lowlands. The Bear clan preferred the old ways, but trade with the outside world had begun to change their attitudes. Only the Elk remained true to their culture, and they demanded the other clans do so as well, often leading to conflict. The War of the Master drove these divisions even deeper. The war negatively affected most of the tribes. The Tiger clan allied themselves with the Master and sent thousands of their braves to attack the cities of Darachin and the Shires. The Turtle clan avoided the worst of the war because of the protection from the nearby Fey Court. The Horse clan finally left the plateau and found themselves in an artificial winter that hampered their initial plans. Thar's Legion attacked the Elk and Bear clans when a good number of the humanoids scaled the cliff to attack the softer targets on top of it. When the war was over, Atruaghin was thrust into the public spotlight because of the actions of its shamani and the creation of New Angmar. It was difficult to go back to the old ways now, whether they wanted to or not. They were now members of the international community. Besides, the Horse clan had stolen most of the bison when they escaped. The long winter was devastating for most clans, not just in losing crops, but they were not used to dealing with the heavy snow. The largely nomadic Horse clan had few permanent structures and were forced to shelter in place from the blowing snow on the worst days. Starvation became a significant threat to smaller tribes as they didn't have food stores that could last almost a year without new crops. The Elk clan was able to send out relief shipments to towns that were in danger of running out of food, but shipments to the Bear and Horse tribes always came with stipulations. Worse, the humanoids on the plateau were starving as well, so defending the convoys was always a priority, and success was never guaranteed. Tensions between the 3 tribes on the plateau grew more strained due to the war and the weather. The Elk and Bear both claimed that the Horse braves were driving the bison away from the traditional grazing lands and into lands considered horse territory. The Elk despised outsiders, at least the tribal leaders did, and the war not only brought humanoids into their lands, but visitors from other nations were an uncommon sight thanks to the Bear clan's partnership with Darachin. The Thaetian conquest of the Tiger lands put them directly at the base of the plateau, and the Elk knew they couldn't defeat a professional army of that size if they could figure out how to scale the walls. The cracks started to appear before the war, but in the years following, long-held rivalries, disputes, and grudges split the clans apart, and even began pushing the tribes in different directions. Some clans could handle the changing future of the Atruaghin people, but others couldn't adjust, and their people suffered for it. When all was said and done, the Atruaghin clans looked nothing like they had in the past. The Tiger clan had left the Confederacy long ago, having turned away from the worship of Atruaghin and instead embracing the teachings of Azanthiotl and their patron immortal Danal Tiger Stripes. Being trapped at the plateau's base only left them enraged because they couldn't strike at their most hated foes. Azanthiotl demanded sacrifices, and their poor location left them with few targets. The clan was already starting to fracture because of its 3 leaders, each seeking their own goals. When the Master of Hul's emissaries promised the clan, or more specifically their leaders, wealth and slaves if they would join the war against Darachin and their allies, it wasn't a tough decision. The Tiger warriors were initially hesitant to get on the Hulian ships. They were not a nautical people. But after some convincing and threatening from the priesthood, the Tiger braves were soon raiding up and down the coast of the 5 Shires. Initially, the war went well for them. They were able to overrun entire Hin villages, with the Shire folk unaccustomed to the savagery of Azanthiotl's warriors. The troops were broken up into forces only a few hundred in size and allowed to attack in every direction, preventing the enemy from predicting their movements. Sacrifices poured into the forest of death almost daily, and the priests of the Viper and Tiger claimed that this was proof of the immortal's blessings. But then the snow of the long winter started, and the Tiger clan warriors, accustomed to fighting in a jungle, weren't prepared for the cold and the snow the destruction of the great meteor brought. They froze by the score. The Tiger's bane came from across the ocean when the weather finally broke. The Irindi joined the war, with their superior navy crushing the Hulian fleet. The small-scale tactics the Tiger clan used to great effort were countered when they faced the entire armies of Irindi, Karamikos, and Darachin. They were raiders, not a full-blown military. When the enemy's reinforcements arrived, it showed on the field of battle. Of the 100,000 Tiger braves sent abroad, less than 20% returned. The Tiger rulers blamed each other. The Viper priest Talotaxel pushed for the war, inspired by visions from the immortal Azanthiotl. He was the true power behind the Tiger clan, even if he had to manipulate the others to get what he wanted. The tiger priest Tilil Pontaque was a fat, greedy man who was instantly swayed by the tribute offered by the master's delegates. He was utterly useless as a leader, but was a figurehead for his people. Chief Zulteca was the official leader of the clan, but he was essentially powerless. When they were defeated, they immediately started scheming against each other to blame their rivals for the defeat and seize total power for themselves. This bickering paralyzed their government for over a year. Then the Thaiatians arrived. The invading legion wasn't a standard army. The troops were trained to fight in skirmish formation. This allowed them to fight the Tiger Braves on equal terms. Normally, the Braves would have routed the Thaiatians with just sheer numbers, but the clan hadn't recovered even a quarter of its losses since the war. The infighting between the leaders cost them precious time to regain their strength, and now they were losing one city after another. When 3 additional legions arrived, the Tiger clan was doomed. They had squandered their military through ill-advised tactics and poor planning. Only the city of Makuixcoatl was spared. Its leader had long lost her faith in the clan's government because of mismanagement. She surrendered her city to the Darrican garrison at Port Tinabar. Now she rules a free city under the watchful eye of a Darrican legion. The capital braced itself for a siege and still fell within a week. Tlatoxel fled the city before the legions arrived. Rather than wait for relief, Zutecaholti rode out with the bulk of his forces and was captured in a lopsided battle. As the Thaiatian troops swarmed into the city, Tilil Pontaque tried to bribe his way out, only to be thrown down the steps of the Great Pyramid by the now freed slaves. Zutecaholti was taken back to Thaiata City in chains while the Thaiatian commander set up his new command in the former capital of Kuan Mitzli. The Tiger clan had fallen, though the Thaiatians didn't bother to take control of anything outside the cities. But High Priest Tilil Toxel wasn't done yet. He was still trying to finish the mouth of Azcan, a giant pit leading to the Hollow World and the hundreds of thousands of Azcan warriors waiting on the other end. The mouth was deep in the Forest of Death, where the Thaiatians didn't bother patrolling. He worked the slaves as fast as he could, as the completion of the project was still years away, and was not even proceeding at half speed now. When slaves died, he sent his few remaining troops to acquire more, but not to alert the occupiers of their presence. In the Hollow World, work continued with the workers there, but without the Tiger clan's steel tools, the Azcans were just as hampered. 10 years after the conquest of the Tiger clan, the Thaiatians finally tracked a raiding party back to the mouth. The fight was fierce but brief. Tlatoxel never stood a chance, and he knew it. Rather than being taken prisoner, he sacrificed himself by leaping into the mouth. Surviving Tiger priests claimed the project was a mine, but the Thaiatians saw no gold in the mouth, so they moved the workers to the gold mines in other parts of the nation. The Azcans still dig up towards the surface. When their half of the mouth of Azcan reaches the Tiger clan's half, the Thaiatians and the rest of the surface will have to deal with the countless Azcan warriors. At the rate they're going, this should be in about 5 years. The fall of the Bear Clan was much more insidious and entirely self-inflicted. The war with the Master knocked the Great Elevator out of action, but repairing it wasn't difficult. Darrican had a supply of replacement parts, and the horses and oxen stolen by the orcs were quickly replaced. This reopened trade with the lowlands almost as soon as the war ended. But with the return of the merchants came the return of the problems. The wealth that flooded the Bear Clan slowed down considerably, but it still arrived on time, just in smaller caravans. But like before the war, the wealth was not evenly divided between the tribes. Chief Rockhopper never understood how to handle his people's new wealth. The grifters and thieves smuggling goods into Darrican or other lands grew bolder in his indecisiveness. Soon, unscrupulous types from the lowlands that coveted Bear Clan goods but didn't want to give Darrican a cut were in direct contact with the Bear Clan thieves that were more than happy to smuggle in the black market trade goods. Worse, these criminals abandoned the old ways, as illegal goods were always more profitable than simple foodstuffs or clothes. Eventually, the black market was a decent percentage of all goods entering the Bear Clan cities. The poorer tribes were located the furthest from the Great Elevator. As the men of coin built new roads from the trading post to the Atruaghin cities, they bypassed the smaller cities because it wasn't profitable. This led to the more affluent tribes ignoring their poorer cousins, favoring the merchant caravans. Worse, the wealthier clans started to adopt the ways of Darrican and other merchants, leading to the breaking of numerous taboos. This enraged the poorer tribes, who demanded Chief Rockhopper do something about the lawbreakers. The chief tried to appease both sides, but he still favored the larger cities as he didn't want to offend the merchants that were bringing in the goods, even if the goods were being hoarded by the more prominent tribes or stolen by the smugglers. Finally, the clan shattered. The merchants were bringing in metal goods in direct violations of Atruaghin law. Worse, the more prominent tribes dropped all pretense of following the old ways and accepted the jewelry, tools, and weapon as status symbols. As much as Atruaghin goods were in vogue in Darrican, a steel plow was the sign of a genuinely wealthy Atruaghin farmer. Braves from the smaller tribes started ambushing the caravans as they moved from the world elevator to other towns. At first, bloodshed was avoided, but eventually open conflict broke out. Rockhopper tried to keep the peace, but it was too late. His poor leadership led to the clan splitting into traditionalists and modernists. The factions refused to acknowledge each other and effectively became two different clans. This left the Bear Clan without a leader, as Rockhopper, when he realized the extent of his failure, walked off the plateau. The Horse Clan never wanted to be on the Great Plateau to begin with. They followed the teachings of Stormtamer over Atruaghin, as their patron was the first of their kind to ascend. They were warriors before the Raising, and spent centuries without an enemy to war against. Attacking other clans outside of the Tiger was forbidden. Besides, the Turtle Clan was in the lowlands, and the other two clans offered little to the Horse Clan outside of practice. The fortuitous discovery of a purple worm tunnel was their best chance to escape their gilded prison, and the Master's War was their best opportunity. After using a Glantrine wizard to expand and stabilize the tunnel, their braves carefully started herding the bison their clan depended on into their territory. All the clans on the plateau needed the bison, but the Horse Clan's culture centered on them. The loss of the herds would be devastating to the elk and bear, but it was a small price for the horse. When the long winter hit, the bison began to forage through the deep snow looking for food. Then Chief Nakona decided it was time for the Horse Clan to take their place on the lowlands before the other clans started hunting the bison out of season. The Horse Clan had practiced the transit through the cave they called the Sosian repeatedly. The clan was ready. They had a year's worth of food packed and ready on their workhorses. The bison would be tricky. There were tens of thousands of them, and driving the stubborn beasts through the miles-long tunnel would be difficult. If they stampeded, they would crush themselves to death. If the clan took too long, the elk and bear might discover their plan. But the braves and scout in charge of moving the herd had practiced on horses dozens of times. They had at least some training. In a process that took the better part of a day, the clan relocated over 50,000 bison and their entire clan to their new home, formerly the Nagpuri Game Reserve of Sindh. Their disappearance shocked the two remaining clans, though the bear had its own problems to deal with, and there was nothing the elk could do except curse their cousins. The arrival of the Horse Clan impacted the course of the war once the snow had receded. They were looking for a fight, and their immediate neighbors were a large tribe of pachydermians that held little for the horse braves to raid, and worse, were more than capable of dismounting a warrior with a bone-shattering force in a single swipe. The Horse Clan agreed to practice ceremonial combat with their new neighbors, something the Elephant Men reluctantly agreed to. But once the snow melted, the braves tore into the rear guard of the Hulian forces near Akasole and the plains of Sindh as well. They quickly made a name for themselves as the clan joined forces with the Allies. Not out of any loyalty, but that was the fastest way to gain glory in combat. Over the next 2 decades, the Horse Clan proved themselves difficult neighbors. They loved to fight, raid, and steal, but they could be placated with tribute. Their attacks are rare against Arakan cities. The Horse Clan respects their eastern neighbors' love of the pike and crossbow. The remnants of Sindh are their preferred target, as the Nagpuri province was prosperous before the Mystara arrived, and many of the wealthiest Sindhi relocated there when their revolution occurred. However, their favorite target is their ancient enemies, the Red Orcs occupying the western hills. They will go out of their way to attack the humanoids, as there is more glory in collecting orc scalps than merely raiding a homestead. The Horse Clan's new territory is just called home by the former Atruaghins, but other nations call them the Godan, the Sindh word for horse people. Chief Nakona has stepped aside recently, happy to watch his grandchildren grow up. His hand-picked successor, Jakon, has taken up the mantle of leadership. Other nations have mixed feelings about the Godan. They will happily trade goods and even hire out for a fight, and no one in the region is better at fighting humanoids. But their use of raiding for coming-of-age rituals keeps relations strained, even if the Godans avoid permanent harm to their targets. The Elk clan before the war was the most powerful of all the clans. After the war, as the Horse abandoned the plateau and the Bear clan disintegrated through poor leadership, the Elk clan remained the only organized clan staying on the top. The Turtle clan had abandoned the old ways entirely, but had little contact with the Elk. The Tiger clan was obliterated, but had long since turned to entropy. This should have left the Elk in a position of strength, but a long-lingering internal division was about to change the clan forever. The Elk did play a small part in the War of the Master. With the humanoids rampaging almost unchecked across the plateau, the Elk sent several of their shamani to beseech the lowlanders for assistance. A handful of the Elk shamani were part of the ritual that resulted in the creation of New Angmar, even if they immediately returned after the war. Chief Degataga Tallcorn was enraged when the Horse clan went their own way, but there was nothing he could do about it. He was angry over what he considered the theft of all the bison more than the Horse clan's treachery. When the Bear clan splintered over the foreign trade, he sided with the traditionalists, doubling down on stopping merchants outside the Bear clan's territory. Under his guidance, the shamani reinforced the old ways, making sure that every tenet of their faith was obeyed. Despite Tallcorn's aid, his acceptance of the Bear clan traditionalists only went so far. They were not of his people, and had different customs despite sharing the same faith. He helped them when it served his purpose, primarily to anger the modernist Bear clan members. But even when asked to join by the smaller cities, the chief's answer was always no. The Elk clan helped its people first, and aid to outsiders, even other Atruaghin, was only offered with stipulations. Eventually this attitude started being applied to the other Elk tribes. But not everybody was happy with this new power structure. The Owl tribe was home to the wizards of their clan, and while distrusted and feared by the other tribes, kept with the old ways. The Atruaghin were taught to fear arcane magic, but Atruaghin himself was known to have studied it. An obscure clause in the laws of the Confederation allowed for arcane magic to be studied, but only from the teachings of their patron immortal. The tribal chief, Unaduti Skunkhair, is intelligent and wise and understands the laws of the old ways better than most shamani. The fact that he's a powerful diviner prevents the more radical members of his clan from surprising the tribe with an unannounced inspection. His divination powers also told him that the clan's current course of action would end in tragedy if left unchecked. Tall Corn was reaching old age when the war ended, and he started looking for his heir. Both of his children had taken up the role of shamani, which means they were ineligible to become the clan chief. His favorite candidate was Galalani Fasthorse, a brave who had earned his respect through her almost religious attacks on foreign caravans. Her chief rival was Kanuna Stonemaker, the chief of the Beaver tribe. He was a forward-thinking man, building his version of the Great Elevator, but on the southern edge of the plateau, allowing the Elk to have contact with the Turtle Clan. He was popular, but focused on civil projects rather than enforcing the old ways. Tall Corn called a meeting of the tribal leaders to discuss his successor. He'd already decided on Fasthorse, but the tribe still needed to vote. His voice would carry much favor, and he considered it a formality. But Stonemaker made a strong case for himself. He was about to finish his construction, and the Elk clan could join the world stage on their terms. Fasthorse accused the chief of blasphemy, and in a move that shocked everyone, produced a blade and tried to stab the Beaver tribe leader. Well, everybody except Skunkhair, who saw it coming. He interposed himself between the two candidates, but he had to vaporize her with magic in self-defense when Fasthorse threatened him with the knife. Tallcorn was shocked by what happened and said nothing when Stonemaker was named chief. He taught Fasthorse that those who abandoned the old ways needed to be brought to heel, but he never thought she would try to harm her people. The Turtle Clan are Atruaghin no longer. After being separated from their kin for centuries, they turned to neighboring countries for trade and assistance. They bordered Sin and were less than 100 miles away from Irindi, compared to not only being cut off from the plateau by massive walls, but even if they scaled them, the nearest Elk city was leagues away. Eventually they started abandoning the old ways for a more pragmatic approach. After the war, the Turtle Clan found itself largely unscathed. The Master's forces tried 2 assaults, only to find the clan well protected by the Nunahei, an allied Fey court found where the Singing Forest and Forest of Death met. Their merchants were beginning to make headway in the ports of other nations, and with Darrakan's caravans reduced in numbers and Minrithad gouging everyone they could, Turtle merchant ships were greeted as far away as Thyatis. This expansion of their market had unexpected consequences that they could have never predicted. Thyatis was looking for new territories to expand into, and while still spent from the war, was a formidable enemy. Using information garnered from Turtle Clan sources, Thyatis invaded the depleted Tiger Clan and conquered it within a year. While Thyatis was friendly to the Turtle Clan, even having established an embassy, the clan was very uncomfortable with an expansionistic neighbor who had eyes for more. By this time, the Horse Clan was gone, and the Bear Clan was fighting amongst itself. The Elk Clan only helped people on their terms, despite what the old ways said. Chief Tyee Goldhands spent an entire week consulting with his closest advisors. When he came out of the council, the Turtle Clan was no more. The old ways were no more. The nation of Salishar was born. Salishar was the Atruaghin name for the Sea People. The Salishites would stand independently without relying on ancient agreements with distant kin who were both unable and unwilling to come to their aid. Chief Goldhands first made a treaty with the nation of Irindi, already an old friend of his clan. If Thyatis wished to invade, it would have to be done by land because of Irindi's terrifying fleet. But attacking by land would risk the wrath of the Fey folk, again a thought that would have Phaeacian tacticians lying awake. But Emperor Eusebius had other plans for his armies and recognized the new nation within a few weeks. Salishar is the newest country on the international stage. They're allied with the provisional government of Sind, though the city of Kandraputra did have loyalties to the old Raja. Their merchants have proven quite adept at foreign commerce and are starting to catch up to the mercantile powerhouses of Darrakan and Minrithad. They had a significant head start after the war, but their progress is slowing after Darrakan's economy started ramping up. Goldhands is looking for a replacement in his golden years. He is almost a legendary figure in his clan. He has accommodated his people that still kept with the old ways, while encouraging new customs for those wanting to discard the crueler aspects. He banned slavery and stopped exiling orphans, a barbaric practice he was never comfortable with. The next chief will require approval from the tribes, but at this point, Any one Goldhand suggests will likely be accepted without question. Thus concludes the penultimate section of the 1030 timeline. Like the Northern Reaches, I broke it down by nation, or clan in this case. So the Shadow Elves are going to make their appearance out of order in the next video. 2 tribes are effectively destroyed, but new countries have emerged, and lots more role-playing possibilities as a result. Until then, try the pemmican.